So recently, I was, I don't know, maybe in the fall. This happens frequently to me because I'm not obedient. But I was convicted about my health, about my weight. I was like, okay, I got to do something, you know what I mean? Like, I'm breaking scales and stuff, so, not really, but I was like, I got to do something. So I started eating better, making some choices, changed some habits. I lost about 7 pounds or so. But then my vacation came up. And I thought, on my vacation, I'm taking a vacation, right? So I'm going to take a vacation from eating right? That sounds good, all right? And I think back, as you get older, I find myself envious of my younger days when I could eat way more, right? And now it's like I can't eat much at all, and I get bigger and bigger. So I was like, I'm going to take a vacation from my eating, And so it's like, let's go for like 4 meals a day. You know what I mean? Like 3, let's add a late night one in there too. You know what I mean? And like for sandwich, or for breakfast, let's not have like some cereal. Let's have like a sandwich and chips or something. You know what I mean? Let's up the ante here. We're on vacation. And so I did that. And it was a great time. It was lots of fun, right? But then in the second week, we ended up going to Busch Gardens. And Busch Gardens has lots of roller coasters. And my brain trauma over the years, probably from playing hockey or whatever, I can only ride so many before I start getting really ill. All right, so I don't really enjoy going to amusement parks. It's just like you pay a great amount of money to slowly get more and more ill over the day, right? Until I go home and it's like a 2-hour recovery before I feel okay again, all right? But my daughters love it. And every year they're like, our favorite day is when we go to Busch Gardens. And I'm like, oh, let's come up with another favorite day. You know what I mean? But that's cool. And I enjoy being able to be there with them and do that with them. So I try and ride as many as I can. And so we were there the first day. We're going through the park, and we get to this roller coaster called the Montu, all right? And we get on. I sit right between my girls on either side of me, and you got the big horse collar you put on those roller coasters, And then there's like an emergency strap, right? And you got to click that thing in so that the horse collar fails, the strap will hold you in, and you won't die on the roller coaster, right? Which I had to convince several of my children. They all believe that people are dying all the time in roller coasters, all right? All right? And so, you talk to your kids about that, you talk to them, they don't believe you, and so eventually I just started, when we'd pull up, I'd be like, oh, look, people are falling now. You're right, they are dying, Oh, look, they died on that loop. And then they'd be like, Dad, But anyway, so we're on this thing. Well, that, vacation from eating bit me, all right? The horse collar was good, right? But I got to this thing, right? And I'm like, right? And it's so close. It's so close. But it's just like, I just can't get it, So I'm like, oh my goodness, you know what I mean? And so the ride guy comes over and he's like, sir, we can get the adapted car. And I'm like, we're not getting the adapted car. Just like me in a car alone, just let me out, And I'm like, girls, you're riding on your own, you know what I mean? So I fifth it up, and I get out and walk off, and I walk all the way down, and my wife doesn't. She rides them. She tries to ride them, but when my wife rides, she loses all sense of reality, right? And if you ever get a chance, which you probably won't, to ride a roller coaster with my wife, I highly, highly advise it, because it's a ride all in itself, you know what I mean? Every jolt's a, I don't even watch the ride. I'm like, this is the best thing I've ever seen. You know what I mean? This is like, you're going to be okay. My thought on a roller coaster is either I'm going to be okay or I'm going to be in heaven. So who cares, right? I'm just like, woo, And so I walked all the way down. She was waiting for everybody, and I get down there, and I'm like, I'm too fat to go on the roller coaster. I was like, can you believe this? So we went to a bunch of other ones, and it was fine. And I was like, I swear, I'm not any bigger than I've been in the past. So I was like, I don't know what's going on, And we get to another one, and my daughter was going alone. It's kind of one that kind of rocks your head a lot. So Emily was the only one going. I was like, you know what? I'll go with you. I hate this thing, but it's things to go alone. So we get up there, and I'd been on a couple more, and it was fine. And I get on that one, and again, I get the thing on, and I'm like, and eventually the dude comes over, and he's got a knee on me. You know what I mean? Like he's pulling a tooth, He's like, clack! And I'm like, thanks, buddy. And I'm like, dude, I swear I'm not any bigger. Aren't these things adjustable? And he's like, I'm going to tell you a secret. They're the same as they've always been. And then I'm like, and because I don't care, I'm like, so I'm just this fat. I'm like talking this loud too, like all the people around me. I'm like, I've gotten this fat that oh my goodness, Yeah, so it was fun, all right? And But what happened to me and what I thought about a lot of was the envy I had for people or even my younger self to just eat whatever they want. Doesn't matter, right? And I thought about that, and I looked up the definition. The definition of the word envy is this: a feeling of discontent or resentful longing caused by someone else's possessions, qualities, or luck. A desire to have a quality, possession, or other desirable attribute of someone else. And I thought about this food thing. And this year I've coached a hockey team all year, and with those guys we've tried to get them to gain weight. I have a very skinny, small team, which isn't good when you're playing a contact sport. And so we've had to get them to gain weight, and they struggle to gain weight. Is this your problem? This is not my problem. I have great envy of them. You know what I mean? Now part of the problem with that is that this next generation of kids, I call them the buttered noodle brigade, right? And that's that, like, they've only eaten a buttered noodle or a chicken tender their whole life, right? So, like, they don't want to eat a lot because there's so little selections out there, But a lot of it is the guys will be like, yeah, I just forget to eat. I'm like, I've never forgotten to eat in my life. Like, you know what I mean? And there's like, oh, yeah, I just didn't feel like it. I'm like, I just ate breakfast like an hour and a half ago. I already want to eat more now. You know what I mean? I'm like, oh my goodness. Like, I could gain weight. They're like, they're on a path to try and gain a pound a week. I'm like, I gained 7 pounds in 2. You know what I mean? Like, I'm a champ here, But I envy them. I do. I'm like, oh, I wish I burned that much, or I wish I didn't feel like it. Oh, that's envy. But all joking aside, envy is really a massive problem for our world, but it really is a problem for Christians. I think it's something that we don't notice and we don't see, but it's a problem for us. It attacks us. It's sneaky. There's a reason it's in the 10 Commandments. It is a very, very dangerous thing that plagues us. If you turn to James 3:16, it says, "For where you have envy and selfish ambition, there you will find disorder and every evil practice." I believe envy is kind of like a gateway sin. It brings other sins with it. All right? And that's what makes it so dangerous, is that just the thought of it and just the envious thoughts we may have, and it doesn't have to be, a lot of times I think it's easy to think about envy with possessions, like, oh, I wish I had that guy's car, I wish I had that guy's house, I wish I had that guy's whatever, all right? But envy can be anything. It can be anything. It can be a lifestyle, it can be a personality trait, it can be a standard of living, it can be anything, right? And those thoughts in our head, all right, may not seem like a big deal because they're just in our head, but it leads to other sins that are problematic. And that's what's so dangerous about envy and why we need to fight against it. If you turn to Genesis 4, 2 through 12, one of the first stories about envy in the Word, and we'll just read through this. It's about Cain and Abel. It says, "Later she gave birth to his brother Abel. Now Abel kept flocks, and Cain worked the soil. In the course of time, Cain brought some of the fruits of the soil as an offering to the Lord. And Abel also brought an offering, fat portions from some of the firstborn of his flock. The Lord looked with favor on Abel and his offering, but on Cain and his offering he did not look with favor." Now, it's a matter of their hearts. It's very specific to point out that Abel brought fat portions. He brought the good stuff to God, and that Cain just brought some. So the problem is with Cain's heart and what he brought to God as an offering. So Cain was very angry and his face was downcast. And the Lord said to Cain, "Why are you so angry? Why is your face downcast? If you do what is right, will you not be accepted? But if you do not do what is right, sin is crouching at your door. It desires to have you, but you must rule over it." It's interesting now, we see that Cain was envious of his brother's favor, right? And a lot of times what envy does in our lives is we get envious of something, and it's an excuse not to deal with our issue. Right? I'm envious. He's envious of Abel. Oh, you got treated better. You got this. And the reason for that was because he didn't do it right? He didn't bring God the right thing he was supposed to bring him. And so instead of taking that on and saying, okay, God, I got sin here. I need to work on this. And God even telling him, this is the problem. He instead focuses on his brother. So it says that, now Cain said to his brother Abel, "Let's go out in the field." While they're in the field, Cain attacked his brother Abel and killed him. Then the Lord said to Cain, "Where's your brother Abel?" "I don't know." He replied, "Am I my brother's keeper?" The Lord said, "What have you done? Listen, your brother's blood cries out to me from the ground. Now you are under a curse and driven from the ground, which opened its mouth to receive your brother's blood from your hand. When you work the ground, it will no longer yield its crops for you. You will be a restless wanderer under the earth." Now, what's interesting about this story is just that we see this envy in place, and we see the impact it had on Cain, and that because of the actions, like I said, envy brings other sins with it. Because it led to murder, it led to a curse. And envy brings a curse on us when we get caught up in it. And it's very easy and it's very almost subconscious. If you turn to Proverbs 14:30. Proverbs 14:30 says, "A heart at peace gives life to the body, but envy rots the bones." Right? Envy is like a poison that gets in us as we start looking at other things and being living in a place of discontent with our life, with what we have, and looking at other things and saying, oh, I want that, or oh man, I wish I could have that, or even a yearning and a longing that we have for those other things. Envious people are miserable people. You know, I think of a player I coached for a couple years, and he was a kid who always knew if they had a really good player on the other team, you know, if they had like a really good travel player on the other team, he would somehow find out. I don't know how, because I didn't know. I don't care. I don't care if the other team has a professional. We're going to make his day miserable, right? We're going to play, whatever. And he would always find out if they had some kind of other advantage or if they knew something, all right? And every time we'd get beaten by a team like that, he'd be pouting and miserable and unhappy and, oh, it was unfair, it was unfair, it was unfair. It's like, how about we not worry about it? Why are you so envious of what they have? And why aren't you grateful and content with what we have? And let's be happy with what we have and do our best. And if we do our best and we lose, who cares? We did our best, right? But he was such a miserable player. And I felt bad for him. Tried to talk to him about it. Just couldn't get through to him. It's just his mindset was one of envy. You know, like I mentioned earlier, it's not just possessions. There's a great story in the Old Testament in Numbers 16. We're not going to read the whole story. We're going to read the beginning of it, but you're welcome to read all of it. Numbers 16, we're going to go verse 1 through 7. It says, Korah of Izhar, the son of Kohath, the son of Levi, and certain Reubenites, Dathan and Abiram, sons of Eliab, and On, son of Peleth, became insolent. Now, where we're at right now, give you a little background, is we're in the desert, in the wilderness. Moses is leading the Israelites, and they're out there. And what we have come up is a bit of a rebellion against Moses' leadership. So they rose up against Moses. With them were 250 Israelite men, well-known community leaders who had been appointed members of the council. So they weren't just a bunch of disgruntled people that didn't matter. They were leaders, led by Korah, Dathan, and Abiram. Leaders that rose up against Moses and Aaron's rule. They came as a group to oppose Moses and Aaron and said to them, you have gone too far. The whole community is holy, every one of them, and the Lord is with them. Why do you set yourselves above the Lord's assembly? When Moses heard this, he fell face down. Then he said to Korah and all his followers, in the morning, the Lord will show who belongs to him and who is holy, and he will have that person come near him. The man he chooses, he will cause to come near him. You, Korah and all your followers, are to do this. Take censers, and tomorrow put burning coals and incense in them before the Lord. The man the Lord chooses will be the one who is holy. You Levites have gone too far. Now, what we find out is what we see here is a situation, this is very common, it happens everywhere in our world, where people started looking at the leader, and they started saying, why do you think you're so special? The problem here was Moses and Aaron didn't appoint themselves. God did. So God had put them in charge, which God says he does about our leadership. God says that God puts the authorities in charge, which sometimes is hard to believe, but that's what the word says. And God put those leaders there. And so they decided to get together, and they rebelled against us and said, we're holy too, we're just as good. So Moses said, okay, in the morning, we'll see who God picks. They're not going to read the whole story, but God didn't pick them, all right? Korah, Dathan, and Abiram and their families, the earth swallows them up the next morning. That's a vote of confidence for the leaders, right? All right? So be careful if you got something with Pastor Andy. You know, I'm just saying, you know what I mean? Especially if he says, go put some coals in a censer, then just walk away, right? Because you're done. The other leaders that were following them, all the 250 that had their censers, fire came out and vaporized them. And the other people that grumbled and followed them, a plague came on them. So what I see here is that envy leads to rebellion. Rebellion is a sin God despises. Right around chapter 16 in Numbers, you see three different points where the Israelites are they're with discontent and they're rebellious, and God just deals with it each time. So we have to realize that harboring envy, not dealing with it, not responding to it, it's going to lead to other problems, which in Cain's curse led to a curse, or in Cain's issue led to a curse. In these guys' issue led to a lot of judgment, and it's going to happen in our lives too. We have to realize that that envious seed that plants in our minds will then affect our behaviors. And those behaviors will lead us into sin, which will be problematic for us. We envy all kinds of things about people. We can envy a person's personality. You know, we say, oh, only I was like them. Oh, look at how easily they deal with stuff. Look at how life is just easy for them, right? It's fun that we do that and we never know the whole picture. We see one little bit of their life and we think, oh, it's so easy for them. We have no idea. But we do that. We envy people's position. You know, oh, if I could just be that, I'd be happy. If I could just do that, I'd be happy. If I could just have that, I'd be happy. We envy people's lifestyles. Oh, look at, they get to go away and do this. They get to do that. They get this kind of type of thing, and we can envy that. We envy relationships. We can say, oh, look at their marriage. They're just perfect. I guarantee they're not. No marriage is perfect. Look at their relationship with their kids. Oh, I bet it's just perfect. I bet look at those kids respect them. Or look at as kids, we say, oh, if only I could have those parents. They're the coolest family. Oh, all right. And we can envy people's standard of living. I get caught up with this. Like when my car is like chugging on the way home like it was yesterday, and I'm looking across and there's like some 21-year-old and like a 2023, I'm like, I hate you. You know what I mean? You know, I'm like, I know you didn't buy that, all right? It's probably a lease. You don't even have to do the car repairs, you know what I mean? And I want to come out of my window and choke him, you know? But no, it's easy. I mean, I have to watch what I spend. I have to be careful. I have to save. I have to do things. If I want to do something nice for vacation, we save all year. And it's easy to envy someone else how they live, you know? It's like, it's so easy to get caught up in that. It's easy to envy someone's level of influence or the respect they have. Say like, oh, I want to be treated that way, or I want to be able to do that. And then, of course, it's very easy to, and this is usually what we think of with envy, is just to envy someone's money or their wealth, their possessions, see what they have and say, oh, I wish I had that. I think that advertising and social media kills us in this area. Advertising, because their whole point is to make you envious. You got to realize that. They want you to envy, so you'll buy. That's the whole thing, right? So they want to show you if you had this car, if you did this thing, if you went to this place, if you, whatever, that, you know, if you could do this, you'd be satisfied. And we think that, and then we put our money towards that. And social media is just a joke because it's everybody putting their best face forward, right? It's everybody saying like, oh, you know, I've never been like this, but, you know, so it's just like, oh, my kids are so amazing. They did this, and this, and this. And I was like, I know your kids. They're annoying, you know. But nah, just joking, maybe. But no, you know what I mean? It's like, good night. Why are we doing this? Why are we getting on to tell everybody this stuff? Why don't we just tell our kids, right? Isn't that what matters? Make sure you're doing that. If you're going to do the other, make sure you're telling your kids. Make sure we're doing that. But what my point is, like, that has an impact when other people see it, or when you see it, and you see this thing, you know, like it's Valentine's Day, and you see all the cute pictures of the couples, and it's like, oh, I love you all my life, and everything like that. And if your relationship's not in a good place, that's hard. Now, I'm not saying that's wrong that we do that. I'm just saying it creates envy when we see that, because we don't know the ins and outs of what's really happening in that relationship, in that family, in that home, right? You know, oh, look at my new house, look how great it is, and you're like, oh man, look at my house, like there's a leak over my dining room table, you know what I mean? You know, and so it's like, it's so easy, and I'm not saying that that's bad that we put that stuff out there, but I'm saying it absolutely creates those thoughts in us that we don't really realize are sin. We have to fight them. We have to replace them with something better, you know? And so that's what I'm talking about, is like when we let that stuff go, it starts to fester, it starts to work on us. We start to look at what we have and like, oh, whether it's, you know, our stuff we have or our relationships we have, and we become kind of disgruntled about it, you know? And we're not content with it, and we're not happy about it, which leads to other sins. God plainly speaks against it. Galatians 5:26, a lot of what we've been talking about is out of the Old Testament. This is out of the New Testament. It says, let us not become conceited, provoking, and envying each other. It's pretty plain. Let's not envy each other, period, all right? 1 Corinthians 13:4 talks about love. You know, they read it at every wedding practically. Love is patient, love is kind. It does not envy. It does not boast. It is not proud. You know, love is what is supposed to be at the heart of everything we do. We love the Lord our God with all our heart, soul, and mind. We love others as ourselves. It's everything. And love doesn't envy, all right? When it comes in, I mentioned that envy is a poison. When we envy, it is a poison between our relationship with God. That we are supposed to love him with all our heart, soul, and mind. And when we're envious of things, it's a poison, right? Because here's the scary thing. God has given you exactly what you have right now. He has given it to you, right? It's poisonous to our relationships. Because when we envy things and we start thinking that way and we start comparing and looking at it, it then creates a feeling towards the people in our lives that they're not where we want them to be. We're not happy with them. And that is a poison for our relationships. The good news is there's an antidote to that poison, all right? And that is what we're going to talk about in our second half here, and that antidote is contentment, all right? Contentment is a state of happiness and satisfaction to appease the desires of to be satisfied. Just as envy rots the bones, contentment is like calcium. It builds the bones. All right? It is a medicine to our bodies and our bones and our spiritual, like our skeleton. It builds us up. Philippians 4:11 through 13. If you turn there. It says, I'm not saying this because I am in need, for I have learned to be content, whatever the circumstances. I know what it is to be in need, and I know what it is to have plenty. I have learned the secret of being content in any and every situation. Whether well-fed or hungry, whether living in plenty or in want, I can do all things through him who gives me strength. I think it's interesting there. It says, I've learned the secret of contentment. Doesn't mean there's some other secret. The secret is contentment. The reason Paul could be okay everywhere, because he learned the secret of contentment, of realizing that God's sovereign, he's in charge. And that he has put me in this place, so I have everything I need. I may be in want in that place. I may be in plenty in that place, but he's in charge. He's given me what I need right now. And he learned that secret of being contentment, which, like I said, blesses and meets the needs of your body, of your spirit, of your soul when we're there, whereas envy rots it and is like a poison. 1 Corinthians 7:17. In this passage, Paul is talking about marriage. He's talking about salvation. But it says, nevertheless, each person should live as a believer in whatever situation the Lord has assigned to them, just as God has called them. This is the rule I lay down in all the churches. All right? What I find so interesting about this is that Paul is telling people, at one point later in these verses, he talks about slaves, and he says, if you're a slave, if you can get your freedom, great, but otherwise, don't let it bother you. Live for the Lord. And that's wild, right? That's what God was saying through Paul. Meaning, if you're in a really bad situation, all right, the goal is not to get into a better situation where you're happy. The goal is to embrace the Lord right there. Be happy now. If you can get out, get out. Don't be a slave. But if you can't, be a slave for me. And I look at that and I'm like, wow, I do not think that I live with that type of attitude in my life, right? I think if I could just get rid of this problem, I'll be satisfied. If I could just get over here, I'll be satisfied. If I could just get a little bit more money and get over this hump, I'll be content. If I can just go over here and do this, or if you're like single and you're like, if I could just find this person, this right person that would complete me, then I'll be happy. Let's laugh some more about that, all right? No. Lord brings two people together, right? And those people work at being together and becoming one. And I was like, I don't know where I heard it. I don't know if I made it up. I have no idea. But it's two squares on spinners, all right? And you just put them together. And it's just until they're round, right? That's marriage, right? It really, all right? You have all these square edges, all these ideas about yourself and the way you think it should be done and all this stuff, and then you become with somebody else that God's put you together with that's completely opposite of you, right? And you have to become one. And it's not that you think, oh, that person is, I'm going to put all my hopes on them making me satisfied. How egotistical is that? Oh, my goodness, right? Instead, I need to come and we need to become one. I need to be valuing them. I need to be supporting them. We need to do this. God has brought us together to be this person one, and we need to do that. So I'm saying that's why I laugh about that, the idea that you think a person out there is going to make you satisfied. There's only one person that makes us satisfied. It's our Father in heaven. It's Jesus, his Son. It's the Holy Spirit. That's the only thing that will bring contentment and satisfaction to us. Yet, I myself, maybe you, I don't know, continue to fall into this concept that's flawed, that something out here is going to make me satisfied. That something, money, that, you know, and I don't want to be wealthy, but just enough that you don't have to worry, let's say, you know, or position or influence or relationship or whatever, thinking that way, and that's envy, all right? God has assigned us where we are. He's put us in the spot we're in right now. And he's going to give us everything we need to find contentment in that and to be blessed. He's going to work it all out. But we're at where we're at. God knows. He wasn't on vacation. And that's very scary sometimes to think that way. But that's what it says. We've been assigned to a place in our family. I was born in a certain order in my family. I was the baby, born as the baby, right? So I got picked on all the time, right? I had two older brothers. I picked on all the time, and I was the smallest and the weakest, all right? Now I'm the strongest. I could take both my brothers now, okay? Anyway, that's a side note. And then later in life, being the baby, I get put in the role that I have to take care of my mom. Didn't seem fair to me. I'm like, what about you two? You bums, older brothers of mine, right? Step up. You're the older brothers. Nope. That wasn't the way it was. And I could have been bitter about that, and I was. I was envious at times. But instead, God showed me, I've assigned you this. And when I realized that, oh my goodness, the blessings I had being with my mom all the way to the end. I got to be with her. I got to sit there. I got to be blessed. I got to be blessed the day before she died listening to her. Like unbelievably blessed. And they didn't. But I only got that because I didn't get caught up in envy. I just said, okay, Lord, you've chosen me to be this. It's not some unfair in the universe, thing in the universe. You've chosen me. You know, God has assigned us our gender. He's made us what we are, all right? So that's a struggle sometimes for people, and I understand. But he's assigned that to us. He's assigned the spouse you have. If you're married now. It doesn't matter how you got married. You're married. He's assigned it. It's it. You know, what I mean by that is you may not have been a believer before you got married. You may not have sought God before you got married. You may not have done any of those things, but you're married now. And it is what it is. Vow before the Lord. He's assigned that to you. All right? So being envious or looking at things or not being content with what you have is only going to lead to more problems for you. It's only going to lead to sins that are going to bring a curse on your life. He's assigned you the kids you have. You may want to trade them some days. You know what I mean? Say, how about I'll give you these 3 for that one, and I'll throw in, I don't know, 10 grand. You know what I mean? What do you think? You know? All right? You may think that way. All right? I don't know. But he's given you those kids. And it's funny to laugh about and think that way, but if you think instead of the opposite way, which is, these are my kids. God gave them to me. They drive me nuts sometimes. Each one of my kids drive me nuts sometimes. All right? But these are the ones God gave me. And so I don't think that way at all. And when you don't think that way at all, man, do you approach things completely differently. You know? Like I realize on the team that I have, coaching the team I have, I got a group of guys in, and we didn't have enough guys to play, really. Most teams would have canceled their season instead of playing with the number of guys I had. We had 11 skaters, and we ended up with 2 goalies. And more than half those guys probably weren't really ready to play at the college level we were at. And I could have went through my season like, oh, I wish I had better players. I wish I had more players. I wish I did blah, 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 blah. I could have done that. And but I realized from the beginning that God gave me every single guy I was supposed to have, and he gave me the right number of guys, you know? So when I lost a player the first game to a broken wrist, my best player, all right, I was like, okay. Yeah, and I was like, all right, you've assigned this. So instead of getting caught up in envy, which leads to bitterness and resentment and all this stuff or whatever, I'm just going to be like, okay, what are you doing here? Let's figure it out, Lord. You're in charge. Let's work it out. And you know what? Because of that, I felt like I did the best job. I had the best relationship I could have had with my guys. I love my guys. And being on the other side of it now with our season just finishing up, I look at it and I'm like, holy cow, God, you brought every single one of those guys here for a reason. Every single one of those guys, I'm so glad they came. I can't believe how much better they got. Can't believe how they came together. Can't believe what you did. And if it wasn't this way, where we were so shorthanded and we were so, in some ways, underskilled, it never would have been as good. You're so cool, you know? But instead, we tend to look at life, we tend to look at what we have, and we look at it like we see what other people have. We see this, and we're like, oh, I wish I had that, if I had this, then I'd be, no. The Lord God, he's sovereign, man. He knows what he's doing. He's giving you exactly what you need. He gives you the parents you have and the siblings you have. He's chosen that. He gives you the job you have, where you're at. Unless he leads you to another thing, he's given you this place to be at, frustrating as it may be. He gives you the state you live in. Ugh, all right? But he did. I was talking to somebody the other day, and I said, honestly, if it wasn't for the relationships I have here, I'd be gone in a second. I mean, I just, whatever. I want an assault rifle. No, I'm just kidding. Not really, but I'm saying, there's just, I don't appreciate a lot of the decisions that are made, let's say. But he's put me here. So I can envy it, I can talk about it, I can gripe about it, but it's only going to lead to sin and a curse. So this is where I'm at. Unless God shows me to go somewhere else, this is where I'm at. The temptation here, though, I will say, is to be somewhat kind of laissez-faire, and that means like hands off. But to be just, I'm not talking about just accepting everything in your life, all right? Because that can kind of be, like when you're, I knew like students like this where they were like, well, I didn't study for the test at all, but, God, it'll be what it be. God will do what he does. It's like, no, like, you know what I mean? But we can kind of be that way with our flaws too. We can kind of just be like, well, I'm just a negative person. So just the way I am, you know what I mean? It's like, well, if you're a Christian, then what you are is a sinner. No offense, but right? It's like you can't do that. You know what I mean? It's like there are things that we need to keep in mind that as we are content with being content means accepting where God has put us. It doesn't mean accepting sin. Okay? So if you turn to 1 Timothy 6:6, I love this because I think it puts it like right in perspective, kind of links it up. It says, but godliness with contentment is great gain. So we have to remember that like we can't live in sin and then act like God has put us there, right? A lot of times sin in our life leads to problems in our life. So we can't be walking in sin and then be like, well, what do you do, right? If we are unfaithful with our money and we are doing things we shouldn't do, and then we're not giving like God has called us to do, we're not being responsible like God has called us to do, maybe we're not paying for things we should, and then we just act like, well, it's God's will. I'm like, no, dude, like, you're like spending like $350 on scratch-offs every week, you know what I mean? Like, you can't like do that and then expect that, act like it's God's put you where you're at, So we have to remember that one of the things we have to deal with when we are being content is we have to deal with sin. Sin causes a lot of our negatives in our life, and we can't accept sin. We have to fight against it. Sometimes we can just, even as Christians, we can say, well, I know I'm supposed to do this, but I just don't feel the love for it. Or I just don't feel like I can do it. And it's like, well, that's kind of a crisis of confidence for you. Like, if you're a believer, we have to do some of this stuff. We're called to do it. So like, we can't use our lack of feelings as an excuse. If God showed us to do something, we got to work at it. I know it's hard. I'm not saying it's not hard. Trust me, it's very hard for me. So there's some action points. Some like, okay, what do we do with this? What's the idea here? How can we deal with these areas maybe we are struggling with envy? The first thing is this. You need to meditate on what God's already given you and what he's already done for you. You need to think on it. You need to really actually sit down and start thinking of what, maybe you're struggling in your job and you just hate it and you want another job, but you feel like God has you here. We need to meditate on what are the good things in this job. Maybe it's just you're struggling in your marriage. Maybe you're struggling as a parent with your kids, or maybe you're struggling in some other area. Maybe you're struggling with you're out there and you're single and you're struggling with being single. We need to meditate on what God has already done for us. Hebrews 13:5. Turn there. It says, keep your lives free from the love of money. Be content with what you have, because God has said, never will I leave you, never will I forsake you. It's talking about money, but I think it applies to a whole lot more than that. We have to realize that God is with us, and that's the greatest gift and thing in all of the world, that he is with us. And we need to be content with what we have. Right? We can't, when we do that, that antidote, that calcium for our spiritual bones is going to fill into us. Philippians 4:19. It says, my God will meet all your needs according to his riches, to the riches of his glory in Christ Jesus. When you're a Christian, God's going to give you all you need. He's going to take care of you. It may not be all you want. Not called to always give us all we want, but he's going to give you all you need. He will take care of you. And when we need to think about, what have you already given me, God? What have you already done for me? In your job, in your marriage, as a parent, For your house, if you're struggling and envious and sick of your old house. For your car, for your possessions, for your future, for your church, for your friends. All these areas. If we struggle and we find ourselves wanting and unhappy, and first sit down and meditate what God has done. Give him credit for that. He's a good father. He's already done a lot for us. It's just so easy. You know, you read the story of the Israelites through the Old Testament, right? And they're always wandering away. They're always grumbling and complaining. Every time they come up to a new problem, they're always like, oh, if only we could go back to Egypt where we ate fish and leeks. I'm like, well, I don't want to eat that. You know what I mean? I always think like, I wouldn't have wanted to eat fish and leeks. That's gross, you know? But anyway, but they're always like, are you going to kill us now, God? Every time. And it's so easy to look at me like, what was wrong with them? But we're the same, aren't we? Next problem comes up, we're like, oh, I can't believe this. Oh, I got to deal with this. When God has assigned us this thing, he's assigned us these people in our lives. He's going to help us through it. We just got to get a little closer to him. But so the first thing, we got to meditate on that, think on that. That'll change so much of your perspective. It does for me. When I start thinking about what God has already done for me, the good things that he's given me in my life, man, it causes a change in me. The next thing we do is we need to confess it. So quick to complain. We as a people, just people like all 7 billion of us on the planet. Quick to complain. So we need to, if we meditate on that stuff, we need to confess that. First, we need to confess it to God. Thank you, God, for that you've done this. Even if you're in a relationship, or you're with somebody, or you have a situation that's really bad, I'd be surprised if there's nothing you can thank God for about that person or about that thing. Thank you, God. I mean, this job is driving me crazy, but thank you for this person there. Thank you for this. Thank you for the check I make. Thank you for the whatever. We need to confess it to him. We need to confess it to ourselves. We need to hear ourselves think and say those things. And we need to tell other people about it. We can be quick to share what we don't like about things and how we're envious of what we want with other people, but we're never nearly as quick to share what we're grateful and what we're happy about. And the last thing we need to do, if you turn to Matthew 6:33, it says, but seek first his kingdom and his righteousness, and all these things will be given to you as well. It's very important that we are obeying the Lord. Very important that we're seeking him first. So, you know, we need to meditate on what God has done for us. We need to confess it to him, to ourselves and to others. And we need to obey him in areas of our life. It's funny, but like sin causes so many of the problems in our life. Stuff that we haven't dealt with. We got to obey God. He's done so much for us. You know, I have a cool story, just like I said, finishing up the season of the team I coached. And, you know, we focused our success of our season, our kind of goals and everything on being perseverance, on not quitting, on being humble and understanding, learning how to be that way, on being responsible and having a team-first mentality, caring about each other, and last thing about being encouraging to each other and caring for each other. And those are really the goals. So the goals weren't a certain amount of wins. They weren't winning a trophy or anything like that. Those were the goals. Those were really what I felt like the Lord wanted us to share, what we talked about that, and the guys did a good job of that. We lost a lot of games. We ended up winning our last 5 in a row, which is kind of cool. But to me, to see what occurred, again, there's so many things on our team that you could have been envious of other teams about, or even envious of past teams that guys had played on, and that they could have been living in a land of not being content. But instead, you know, talking to a guy and him saying, you know what, this is the most fun I've ever had on a team where we lost this many games. And he didn't mean that just like we didn't care. He said just the best experience, and I can't wait to see what the future's going to bring with these guys. That every single guy that when we asked them all that is eligible to come back somewhere graduating was like, I'm coming back. And we went like 7-15-1, so it's not like we're playing, you know, we're not knocking it out of the park. You know, if you play sports, if you watch it, whatever, you know that winning brings people together. Losing causes division, all right? It didn't do that, all right? Hearing a dude talk about humility, we had a guy on our team, he went end-to-end, scored a goal, all right? Everybody's going crazy. He comes back to the bench and he goes, if I did that, those guys stink, all right? And I was like, you're getting it, dude. You're getting it. You're the best, all right? You know, it's like, let other people praise you. You just stay humble. And he was serious, you know what I mean? I'm like, I love you. That's awesome, all right? Or hearing, you know, we got a lot of goofballs on our team, like it really, freak show, my team. But they could be in the circus, you know what I mean? But they hearing like one of the dudes on the team who's not real good friends. We didn't have any enemies or anything, but there were guys that weren't as close as other guys. And a guy just got smashed in our last game. Somebody just took him out. And this other kid came down the bench and said, hey, I got you. I'm going to get that guy for you. And I'm like, that's awesome. That's awesome. I'm a guy. We play a physical sport, right? But I'm like, no, it's awesome. He's sticking up for him. I was like, and they're not going on windy walks after the game and splitting shakes with 2 straws or anything. I mean, they're not enemies. They're not enemies, but they're not real close dudes that are like playing video games together all the time, whatever. And he's like, that's just because he's on a team with him, because we're a family. You know what I mean? And then talk about humility. The guy's hilarious. He told me there, he said, yeah, coach, I wanted to hit that guy, but he was way stronger than I thought. And I was like, sorry, dude, you're on your own, And he's like, I tried, I'm like, dude, you're the best. Yeah, you're the best. Seeing there's a guy on a team that was always giving us super dirty. He was just giving us troubles all the time, hitting other people, doing stuff like that. And we played him the last game, and one of our good dudes just stepped up and gave him a good check, smoked him. And I was like, way to go, man. Way to stick up for your team. Way to defend us. I mean, hockey's violent. It's a violent game. And, so I don't condone that on the street. You know what I mean? But seeing guys make choices like that, where every one of those choices wasn't for them, it was for somebody else. It was for that team. Choose to be humble. Choose to keep working, even though we're getting beaten. Choose to do that. So rewarding. And all that could have been taken out by envy. If me as a coach, my other coaches, if our players would have just chosen, decided to be like, oh man, this is unfair, and oh, we don't have enough guys, and oh, this is, blah, 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 blah. Right? And that's what happens to us. So many times in so many areas of our life. It's our envy that creeps in. We don't even realize it because it's in our mind. And it leads to other sins. It leads to us complaining that stuff out, what the Lord despises. It leads to us just sinning in other areas or justifying things because we don't like the way we're being treated. So then we start doing this or we do that or we whatever. And it leads to these sins that puts us under a curse. It is so crucial and important that we realize this. That we realize that God is calling us to first of all meditate on what he's given us, especially in an area you're frustrated with. Think about that. Think of what he has done. I'm not saying it's good. Confess it to God, to yourself, and to others. And make sure you're being obedient. Make sure you are obeying him in that area. Sometimes the problems in our life are just caused by sin. God's not telling us this. This is what's so important to understand at the end here. When you're a parent, when you're a kid, maybe, you got them like lima beans put on your plate or whatever, the Brussels sprouts, and then you were like, hey, you get what you get, you don't throw a fit, or, there's kids in Africa that starve to eat that, which I don't know. Some of the stuff my mom served me, I don't think the African kids would have ate it, no offense. Like green hamburgers and stuff, and I don't know. Anyway, but we get told that, and so when we hear a message like this, that's what we think of again. We think that God wants us to be content because he don't want to hear it. All right? I'm doing enough, I don't want to hear it. That was kind of a lot of times what we felt like with our parents. And what we don't realize is that's not it at all. He's not telling us to choose contentment because he doesn't want to hear it and he's mad that we're not happy. What he realizes is that when we live in envy, we're miserable. It's like all the rules he gives us is not for him. It's not because he wants to control, he wants to be the puppet master. It's because he realizes that if we give in to that, we buy into what the world with advertising and social media and all that stuff, we're always looking for something more, and if I have this, I'll be satisfied. He realized if you do that, you will always be wanting and you will always be miserable. It's why when people go around the countries on mission trips, and there's the kids that are playing with a bunch of clothes that are wrapped up as a soccer ball, and they're happy as a clam, and they don't know where next meal is coming from. People are always amazed. Because they're like, oh my goodness, this is a miserable, horrible life they're living. And they're so happy, which shows us that we have it backwards, right? We don't get content because of what we get. We choose to be content because we trust that God's put us here and given us this. So we're like, unless, like I said, the one changing factor there is sin. If we're sinning, we may be in a pit. I always think about when you're sinning a lot, you're like sitting in a pit holding the shovel, yelling at God. And you're like, oh, wait, I did this, right? So get out of it. Stop sinning, right? Get into a better place. Ask God to help you with that. But otherwise, God's placed us here. And he tells us to be content for our own good and for our own peace and joy. So whatever's getting you, your finances, your marriage, your student, maybe your schoolwork, you're maybe you're single and you're struggling with that, maybe your health. I just encourage you to do that over this time, to take that approach of meditating, maybe even writing it down, confessing things to God, to yourself and others, and make sure you're being obedient to God. When you do that, I think you can find a joy wherever you're at. whatever you're in. You can find a peace and a contentment, which that really is what we should be seeking out in our lives, to have that place. Let's pray. Lord, just thank you so much for just for how good you are, for what you've done in our lives. I thank you for this message. If for no one else, for me, I thank you that you've given me this direction, and I pray that it communicates to someone else out there that you'd help them in these areas so that they can find peace and find contentment, and in that really find a good idea of how much you love them and how special you are, how special you think of them, Lord Jesus. Bless this group. Thank you for your faithfulness, Lord, in your name. Amen. Guys, have a great week.